Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 941. My opponent played e4, went with c5, the Sicilian, and we get a we get a classical Sicilian in a very double-edged and typically Sicilian kind of position. So pretty interesting game. Go with d6. That's the main way to get to these classical lines in the Sicilian. He goes d4, going for the open Sicilian. I take. He takes. And I play knight f6, putting pressure on the e-pawn, which is undefended, so he defends it with the knight, and I play knight c6. So knight c6 here is the classical Sicilian. The other moves here, let's see, this is the Najdorf with a6. There's the Scheveningen with e6, and there's the dragon variation with g6. So those are four of the main variations of the Sicilian. But knight c6, not as well known by name. Anyway, the classical Sicilian is still a fine way to play, and kind of interesting. It often catches people by surprise because they're not as familiar with it as they are with some of the other flashier openings. So he plays, or well-known openings like the Najdorf. He plays bishop g5, which is the main move. So my opponent knows a little something, I guess. A lot of times players will play bishop e3 here, just going for the English attack, which is a bit of a mistake because black can play e5 in this position after bishop e3, and it's like a Najdorf where you haven't needed to play the move a6. You've kind of gained a tempo. The bishop or the knight doesn't really want to go it's not really threatening anything on b5 there, so it usually just retreats. So anyway, and that turns out to be an equal position for black. So a quick way to equalize. But bishop g5, the main line, is keeping up the pressure. So I play e6 so I don't have to take back with a pawn. I can take back with a queen as an option. Sometimes I'll take back with a pawn anyway, as we saw in the game. But he goes queen d2. He's getting some quick pressure on the d file here, preparing to castle queenside. And I go a6, a move that's designed to keep pieces out of the b5 square, which can be a bit of a problem. It's not really so much about knight to b5, which I may have said during the video because that's the way I remember the move. But knight b5 actually is not as much of a threat as you might think. It looks like this d-pawn is weak, but let me show you one idea here. So say I didn't play a6, but I played bishop e7, the other line. This is quite popular. White castles, black castles, and then f4 is the usual way to continue and keep up the pressure. But suppose white likes the idea of winning a pawn, and so takes the knight to pull the bishop away from defense of the d-pawn, and then plays knight to d5. Now this actually wins the pawn, and in fact black is not worried about that. Black kicks the knight and says, go ahead, take that pawn. Knight takes, and then well, bishop to d4. It's a nice little tempo move. The knight protects the bishop, and it blocks the defense of this knight. Cancel that. Where were we? Right here. So yeah, the bishop comes out and blocks the defense of this knight. The knight can escape, though. It takes the bishop. So black doesn't have the bishop pair. The material really is very even. The bishops are of opposite color, actually. A bit of an interesting twist here. And say white continues with f3. I guess there's not a lot of moves for white in this position anyway. That was one of them that the chess engine gave. The queen comes out to b6. I guess if the pawn had been left on f2, it would be threatening to take on f2 at that point. But there's a threat here anyway of bishop coming to e3 and skewering. So the king steps out of the way, and then rook f to d8. And now there's another threat on the queen. And so with a couple of simple moves, black has got all his pieces out, whereas white's bishop is still back here. And this position seems to be a good position for black. It's just like black has all the initiative, and there may be threats against the knight on c3 here. This knight may be hopping in. So yeah, the chess engine rates this as a good position for black, even though black is a pawn down. So seems that is a decent pawn sacrifice. So that's a way you can play here. I just always have played this a6 move, and that's okay as well. And here, white should continue with castling and f4. As we saw on the other line, that's still a good way to play. But he played the move h4, which is interesting. It's not, and we're just out of the book at this point. So after h4, the position seems to be about even. So white has given up some kind of opening advantage, but he's got the makings of a pawn storm here on the king side, so I have to be a little bit careful. Let's see, but I played bishop d7. I still have the idea that if he takes with the bishop, I'll take back with the queen here, and I'm keeping this bishop on f8, defending that pawn, so I don't have to worry about the d pawn. Let's see, he went bishop e2 here, and I went b5. That's a good move, and prepares to dislodge this knight. So right here, white needs to respond to this, actually. There's already a threat, apparently, with the b5. I didn't take advantage of it, but we'll show that in a minute. So he should play a3 here to stop that, and then I could play something like rook b8 to continue my plans of advancing, and white can advance with f4, be a typical way, and a typical kind of double-edged position. Actually, neither of us is castled, so it's a little bit atypical, but we're both launching the pawn storms against the side where we expect our opponent to castle. Anyway, he ignored this b5 move and just played g4, so just getting about his own plans and ignoring my plans. And apparently right here I could have pushed b4. The chess engine gives this as the best line. Can't explain all the moves necessarily because this seems to be helpful. This exchange brings my bishop forward to attack the pawn here, but maybe the knight gets in trouble there. Anyway, the chess engine gives this as the best play for white, or one of the good lines. And oh, that's right, I take with the queen there, sorry. And then now the knight has to move finally, and then I get the pawn. So it seems like I could already win the pawn, although I don't quite understand that line entirely. Right? Why start with knight takes knight, which brings my bishop to a good square? But maybe I have the threat of bringing my knight out here. If he meekly retreats his knight immediately, say he drops back here, I could start to bring my pieces forward. So maybe we get to the same position anyway. So it seems like b4 already was a good move. I went with queen b6 first, which is okay. This keeps some small advantage to white, but we're in the range of about even here. Let's see. He takes. I take. He had to do something about the pressure on the knight. He takes, and now I take with the pawn. Maybe that's why it's not as good as the other line, because I am forced to take with the pawn, and I've weakened my king side over here in this line. And then he castles and just gives up this pawn. He could once again play a3, or also queen f4, and both of those moves seem to lead to a position where black's a little bit better, but white is okay. Castling gives a significant edge to black. Maybe winning, maybe not, but it's a significant edge anyway, because that knight has no good move. Can only go to b1. You can see all these squares are covered by my bishop. That's covered by the pawn. Well, that's covered by the pawn. And then these squares are all blocked. So he only has knight back to b1. And it'll take him another move or two to get the knight back into the game. He's got to move the queen out of the way so the knight can come here. And in the meantime, I can snag a pawn. So maybe winning position for black with correct play, but it's complicated, so maybe it's not so simple. Anyway, his rook is under attack, so I moved it out of the way, and maybe he's preparing to push that f-pawn. Let's see, I played rook to c8. Oh yeah, at this point during the game, I was talking about this sacrifice here, but of course this doesn't work at all. He can just take with the queen. I was thinking, rook here with the skewer, but of course the rook is undefended on that square. In fact, even taking with the king is okay. So this sacrifice just would not work at all. So it's a good thing I decided to play rook c8 here and not go for that. Let's see, he went bishop d3. And so it's at this point, actually, that I give the advantage back, and we get back to an even game again. I should just take. Just taking, queen takes, and h5. And it seems like black keeps that winning edge. h5 is a nice move. It threatens to bring this bishop out. to this diagonal, which looks good, and you know, if the knight comes there, it'll be pinned. And at this point, when he pushes a pawn forward, I can just exchange it off and have a passer. So anyway, it looks like a nice way to play. I wasn't sure about that. I was thinking about repositioning the bishop here, and Chess Engine says, yeah, either of those moves is okay as well, going here or going here. Looking at that pawn, those are also fine moves. But this one just wastes the tempo, because after f4, which is the best move here, you know, it kind of threatens to trap this bishop, almost forces that exchange, and so I just have wasted a tempo, and now it's about an even position. Slight edge to black. d5 is a good move, opening up a line for my bishop. He goes on with f5, and now for the next few moves it kind of goes back and forth, where every other move the evaluation is changing. So I'm not going to call them good moves and bad moves anymore. It's just that it's got the situation has gotten complicated enough that neither of us can find the best moves in the position. I went with bishop c5, and apparently, well, this is kind of logical. Bishop g7 is a better move. It defends the f-pawn. I was worried about the exchange, right? When the exchange happens, it opens up the rook on the f-file, but now it's defended, and the bishop may later serve a useful role on that diagonal. So that's a good way to play. Let's see, I might continue knight d2 and then castles. That's another reason I wanted to show this line, is there's no fear of castling here. Things have opened up, but yeah, the force on the board has been reduced, and white's pieces are not massed around my king. So apparently I have time to defend in this position, and even though these looming pawns here, I do have to be careful about them. Okay, so bishop g7 is the better move here. I went bishop c5. Let's see, he went knight d2. Here's where he could have taken. Taking on e6 would have been better, and grabbed a pawn. I was thinking this check here would be a bit annoying, but after the exchange, well, I can play king e7 first to hit the rook. This rook comes over, and then I can bring the bishop out with check. Goes knight d2. I don't know. I mean, it's not losing for black, but it's not. I've given up my advantage. Maybe white has an advantage now. I forget how the evaluation went exactly, but definitely giving up my edge. So so that bishop c5 move was a mistake, and then knight d2 wasn't the best answer. Let's see, I continued with rook c6 with the idea of taking back when he takes, and defending the f-pawn with my rook. And now he went knight b3, getting his knight into the game. Once again, the Chess Engine says he should take and allow this kind of exchange, because it gives a good square for that rook. And now I can't really defend that d-pawn. So let's see, I can play bishop e3 here. Now let's go continue with the line. He can take, and once again I can castle. And well, it seems to be about an even position once again. Let's count the pawns: 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, even material, bishop versus knight. And yeah, white's king is more secure. I would say white would have better chances in this game, if you were to ask me. But anyway, he went with knight b3 here. I went with king e7, holding on to the center there, and also allowing my rook to come over. He goes rook d to e1. Let's see, bringing the king to e7 is often an idea in these positions, by the way. After you've done the exchange with the g-pawn, your king side is not as attractive as a place for your king to rest, and sometimes it's okay in the center, but it can backfire too, so you do have to be careful. Let's see, I went rook h to c8, doubling on the c file, and he went rook to e2 here. G5 seems to be advantageous for white. This seems to be very strong. So he didn't play this g5 move, but he had the opportunity the next couple of moves here. Instead, he was focused on his piece play here. But, well, sometimes it's you've got to push those pawns. Sometimes that's the right thing to do. Maybe it's not so obvious because my king has moved away from the king side, but it's weakening. G5 is weakening the pawn structure around my king in the center. So that's why that's a strong move. Let's see. He went rook e2 instead, preparing to double. I went to a5. I want to just chase this knight away. Goes rook f e1, and I push on with a4. Let's see. Yeah, here the chess engine like d5. Another kind of mysterious move. Maybe it helps solidify my pawn structure, but it's at a cost, right? It sacrifices here. Then I push the knight. He can take. And the queen can drop back. And then I can push on with b3. I guess that's the point. So give up a pawn to gain a tempo on the queen and push these pawns forward. That's supposed to be pretty strong for black. Anyway, I pushed on with a4, and he took. I took. Oh, I took with the queen. That's right. I didn't want the rook leaving defense of the e pawn, so I took with the queen. Now he takes. Take with the rook, and he plays b3. And I take, he takes, and now I went queen a5. Actually, the best move here, it seems black has a slight edge in this position, but the best move here is rook to a8. And then the king really should start running immediately. So king to d2. Then h6, I guess getting the pawn away from the queen. Rook to f1, shifting attention back to the f file. Then rook takes e2, queen takes e2, check, king back to f8, and rook up to f3, queen to c7. So this is a position where I think, yeah, black has some slight edge, but I don't know. It's a pretty tough position here. This pawn is, he can just take it, I guess, if he wants, but maybe maybe the invasion is pretty dangerous too. And it's a wide open position and anything could happen basically. But that's would give an edge to black according to the engine. So after queen a5 it seems to be equal. Let's see, he throws in this exchange. Plays queen takes h7 check. Maybe it's equal because he gets that pawn back. And then if he just drops his queen back to d3, this position is just rated all 000 by the chess engine. I mean, we both have threats. I have my queen coming in here. He's got his queen coming in here. So both sides have to be careful in terms of their king position. And white has the ability just to push these pawns. Of course, I can push my pawns forward in the center, perhaps. Anyway, yeah, it's only a chess engine would think that position is even, but it's hard to say who would be better. So I guess that's a good evaluation as any. Instead, he played rook d1, and actually white is just losing after that. I wasn't really sure what the point of that move was, but I think it was just to set up. He played this move later. He played queen e4. Maybe he just wanted to get his queen to the square, so he's pinning this pawn in advance. Wanted to get the queen here so it could attack this pawn and out of the way of these pawns so they can come forward. Anyway, it restricts his king a bit and just doesn't seem to do much. Well, and without the queen around here, then I can get my queen to the c3 square. So maybe that's the major point. Maybe he just needed to bring his queen back to defend at that point, and it was just too dangerous to leave the queen over here for another move. Yeah, so I played this part okay. This part I seem to keep the advantage the rest of the game. So his king only has one move, and queen to c3 check was also the best move here. Queen a1 check and queen c3 check. They're pretty obvious, but they were the best moves. He goes king c1. Oops, he goes king c1. He went back. And now rook to a8 is actually a forced mate. He can't stop the mate. So king c1 was a mistake. But every move loses here. And I did not find the move that led to the forced mate, but I played queen takes b3, which is also just winning. It's, you know, like a 7-point advantage for black or something. So I did not give up the win, but I just didn't find the forced mate there. Let's see, he played queen e4 now, taking advantage of this pin. And let's see, I go with the check. That was good. He goes king b1, and I go b3. Yeah, so queen a1 check and b3 are both ways to keep maximum advantage. And now he goes queen f4 check, and after I step here, where there's no more checks for white to deliver against my king, now there's no escaping the forced mate. So even though his next move, c3, may seem like it wasn't the best try, there was like a mate in 4 or 5 in any case. So I go with the check and the mate. So anyway, it was a nice game. Hope you guys enjoyed that, and I will see you later. Bye.